ISA for holding this our nation. Otherwise, there was a silence in Karnataka. I think there was one meeting hosted by PDF to condemn this operation, and after that, I think this is the only meeting in Karnataka, probably, to voice the dissent that we are exercising our right as citizens to condemn the state, and I congratulate for you that for you. And before whatever I wanted to speak, I want to read out a letter which was sent to me by Susan Abraham. You know Susan, who is also a lawyer, a senior lawyer, people's right lawyer. So she received a letter from Himamshu Kumar. You know Himamshu Kumar? Himamshu Kumar is a Gandhian, a perfect Gandhian. He actually denounces armed struggle, denounces Himsa, etc. And he was based in Chhattisgarh, and he was actually voicing for the human rights of the tribals there. But then he was actually chased out of that place. And I think I attended a meeting which was organized by ALF, I think, long back, some 10 years back, when Himamshu Kumar spoke how he could not stay there. And he has actually written a letter, just a minute. Idea? Louder? Oh, okay, I am as loud. I can. Just a minute. I have. Himamshu Kumar says, I had gone to an Adivasi conference. The organization that hosted the conference was headed by an elderly Gandhian. While giving his speech, he started crying and said, we could do nothing against the cruel police officer who filled the vagina of Adivasi human rights activist Soni Suri with stones. He started crying. I was sitting in the hall watching him, and in my mind, the image of Bastar's tribal rebel youth, Hidma, began to appear. Hidma is a most sought after, and as Clifton said, he has a bounty of 5 crore or more than that, for example. I was sitting in the hall watching him, and in my mind, the image of Bastar's tribal rebel youth, Hidma, began to appear. My mind naturally started comparing this Gandhian activist with Hidma. The Gandhian activist was crying over his helplessness. On the other hand, there is the tribal youth from Bastar, Hidma. The government calls Hidma a Naxalite. Amit Shah has launched a campaign to kill Hidma. There was news recently that security forces had surrounded Hidma, and it was feared that Hidma would now be killed. Recently, Soni Suri, a human rights activist from Bastar, called me. She told me that many people, including low-ranking tribal police constables, she told me that many people, including low-ranking tribal police constables, said to her, Didi, Hidma should not die. Following orders from Amit Shah, who is an agent of big capitalists, the police had surrounded Hidma in the forest for 5 days. Everyone expected that Hidma would now be killed. But like a wild leopard, Hidma escaped from the police encirclement. I don't know whether it is true. We don't know that. I am surprised at myself. This is an important question, even I think I want to pose before this meeting. I am surprised by myself. Why am I happy that a tribal man, whom the government calls a Naxalite, managed to escape the police? Why I am happy about that? The truth is, I am someone who has had a connection with Bastar over 35 years. I have seen rapes of Adivasi women by soldiers of Indian authority in Bastar. I have seen dead bodies of tribal children. I have witnessed the brutal acts committed by my own government. My own government did all this to benefit big corporations. I spent 18 years in Bastar, and I know that one time the Indian government feared every tree and every leaf in the forests of Bastar. Sometimes I wake up in fear of thinking, what kind of forest must that be where in order to help capitalist, government, soldier enter and seize land, violate the dignity of tribal women, and no one is there to stop them. If Hidma dies, the fear he instilled in these government looters will also die. Just as people take off their shoes before entering a temple, the government used to remove its metaphorical shoes before entering the forest out of fear. The forest was sacred because Hidma was there. This is Himamshu Kumar saying, and that is the contradiction that we are facing today. If Hidma dies, the government will desecrate the forest and no one will be left to stop them. Because of Hidma, the forest had a certain dignity. What kind of forest will it be? One that holds no respect, seized by the government, where women are raped, young men are killed, and no one remains to stop it. Because Hidma won't be there. 50 years from now, history will record that there was a rebel from Bastar who was killed by an exiled thug using the power of his authority, all to benefit greedy profiteers. Like Birsa Munda and Gundadhur. Hidma will be immortalized in the pages of history, and we will be recorded as cowards who remain silent in the face of such great injustice unfolding before our eyes. This is the letter written by a Gandhian who denounces Himsa, who denounces violence, armed struggle, etc. And one who has lived in Bastar for 18 years to protect the rights of the tribals, and who finally says, if there is no Hidma, there will be no protection to Adivasis. I think this is a greater challenge, a ideological, programmatic, strategic challenge I think we have to face. I think Clifton and Krishna have spoken at length, and I don't have much to add, but I have a larger question. This is the question. Clifton ended by saying this is a fascist time where government becomes very fascistic and very autocratic, and there will be no space for democracy. And whether human right activism, whether labor right activism, we are unable to withhold this state, unleashing a kind of repression of all time. For example, he was speaking about Mool Nivasi Bachao Andolan. In fact, the Chhattisgarh Act actually banned them, saying that they actually wanted to breed dissent against the state. It is not they were the frontal organization of Maoists. They were opposing security camps, and they were actually opposing the interest of the state. That has a broader meaning. If this is accepted, that is been made part of the new criminal acts. The article, I think, the criminal, what is that now? Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. Now they have written that penal is removed and now it is Nyaya. I think Article 111, which says even a non-violent peaceful demonstration which withholds, which actually stops a government officer from performing his work, shall be considered as a terroristic act, and unlawful activities prevention action, the provisions of that has made very normal provisions even within the new act. So now everyone is a terrorist who would oppose this. I think that is the stage. Then what to do? That is the largest challenge. In fact, Bela Bhatia's PhD thesis about democracy in the central Bihar, she made it very clear, and even that 2008 report, which says that it is the Naxal movement which brought in democracy to the central Bihar. Because if democracy is defined as both economic democracy and social democracy, and right to the people, land to the tiller, none of the constitutional institutions did bring in any kind of basic reforms, and it did not empower the people of the Bihar to even exercise their political democracy. It was because of the Naxalite movement that the land was distributed, and after that the political democracy actually entered into central Bihar. Now we are seeing a different situation now where all the resources are actually being looted. Gandhians are actually thrown out. Himanshu Kumar is a metaphor for that. There is no provision for non-violent resistance or a so-called democratic resistance within these areas. And I don't have an answer. Then what to do now? How to actually confront this question? You raise this could be considered as a terroristic activity under BNS. Don't you think so? This could be, this meeting in fact has a complete essence of supporting the people's right.
Sitting at home as well can take on.
But every residential place has become a place for underground shelter. This could be considered as an underground shelter for Naxalites. No, anything can be done. It is not a joke. I think now we are living in a state where the democratic space is being reduced. In fact, the Naxalite movement actually came to existence in a space where there was some semblance of democracy. In 60s, 70s, even in the 90s, of course, Telangana has always been the den of the feudalism, etc. But then there was semblance of democracy, there were some institutions, I think APCLC, HRF, everyone was working, going there, and Bal Gopal was brave enough to say that every encounter is a fake encounter, and it became a common sense. And I always regard our Balgopal for what he said. You have to democratize the revolutionary movement, and you have to revolutionize the democratic movement. That was the ideology he had about human rights movement. That's what he strived for. But then you had some space. Now we are passing through a age where even that space is not there. So then I think that is the dilemma. That is the dilemma Himamshu Kumar has. We can think of Hidmas only protecting. If that becomes the only way out, then what is the way out? How are we going? The state is a surveillance state. The state has become a repressive state. This is a fascist state. And I don't have any, I think, hesitation in calling we are in a fascist state. And it is not just fascist state. Fascism has a social base. That is the difference between an autocratic state and a fascist state. It has a social base. Like Salvajudu, we have in each and every place. In fact, during Bommai government in Karnataka, they wanted to actually have a cyber police force to actually bring intelligence about the Hijadi forces. So you have the rudimentary features of Salvajudum in each and every state, the so-called peace states also. So when there is democratic space is shrinking, and even the non-violent resistance is being dubbed as Maoist and curbed. So that is a greater challenge we have to actually counter with. Where does the change come from? I don't think how the Palestine thing will end without the mediation of the larger global forces. I don't think China will do that. China has its own interest. America will not do it. Sri Lanka finally has gone to a situation where the Tamil identity itself is not there. And what would happen and as Krishna was pointing that these camps are going to stay there. They are permanent structures. They are permanent structures and they would loot there. So I think at least if not Chhattisgarh civil society, the larger civil society have to gather. In fact, I think some human rights activist, or whether I think it was Prashant Bhushan or somebody, who was saying that everyone should be prepared to go for jail. And we should have that. I have not gone to jail, please excuse me for that. But every activist, we have to brave that, and unless that we have to prepare ourselves for a change that is possible in an era of fascism, which is not would be as peaceful, as non-violent probably, as it was in the early decades of the post-independent era. I think that's what I wanted to add.